Hi everyone, my name is Sara Winick, and today I am joined by Saba Sulaiman for this edition of Brown Bag Lit's interview series, Lattes Lit. In today's interview, I'll be talking with the wonderful Saba, who is a senior agent at the Talcott Notch Literary Services. To get more interviews and content like Lattes Lit, make sure to subscribe to our channel by hitting the subscribe button below and click the link in our bio to get more events and information from Brown Bag Lit. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing good. So just to kind of get started with our first question for today, on the website, it says on your website, it says that you were drawn into the world of literature through your sister's growing collection of books as a child. I was wondering if there's one particular book or author that really kind of sealed the deal for you in regards to your love for literature, or one that you can pinpoint as starting to ignite a love of reading in you.
For me, I think my earliest favorite things to read were just everything that was in the library for my age. Everything that so I grew up in South Asia, so we read a lot of British authors, so a lot of Enid Blyton and Roald Dahl, and I just like read all of those books voraciously. I read all the Tintin comics. I read all the Sweet Valley Highs and the twins and the kids. Like I just it was literally just everything. I don't think I had any one particular obsession. For me, it was just storytelling of all kinds and forms. I had some books that were just, local South Asian legends and folk tales,
Yeah.
storybooks that also I just kept rereading and rereading. I would sneak them onto the dining table, and I still have some of them, and I can see like curry stains on on the pages. So yeah, I mean, not a very satisfying answer, but there is no one author. It's just I just wanted to be surrounded by stories all the time.
Yeah, and it definitely is a satisfying answer. I mean, not quite the same, but I have so many books that I read in like sixth grade, and I can't part with the original copies because I still have like kind of the marks from where I like dog eared the pages or bookmarked, and it's just like it's the sentimental value of it, like you said.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting more into your work as an agent, it's mentioned as previously mentioned, you're a senior agent with Talcott Notch Literary Services. On your website, it mentions your commitment to highlighting marginalized voices in literature. So why is it so important to you as an agent specifically to give a platform to those marginalized voices who may or may not have as much access to said platform as other authors?
I think I come from it from two angles. I mean, there's obviously the personal angle. When I started in the industry as someone who is from multiple marginalized backgrounds personally, I experienced being in conversations and at meetings where my perspective was one that not many people, they didn't necessarily not just share it, which is fine. I don't expect people to share my perspective, but they were just so taken aback that there was a perspective like mine, right? And this idea that there is more than one voice, that there is more than one general viewpoint, it seems like it's a facile one that everyone knows is true, but I think not many people are very challenged by it, especially in an industry where traditionally, and certainly when I joined, it was very, very, white and cis and hetero and very, very wealthy New York City adjacent geographically. It just, very well-meaning, educated people were in the industry, but they didn't have access to people or experiences that really made them want to be passionate about storytelling that they didn't necessarily feel personally connected to, which is why I would always say, okay, here's another novel about some sad person living in Brooklyn. Okay, like I I saw so much of that in my submissions when I started out, and I was just like, but I don't care about this story. I mean, and I'm sure there are so many people who do, and to be very honest, there are some great universal stories about people who are sad in Brooklyn that I like. But I guess my point is, I just it was the fact that my own perspectives were being regarded with such, you know, fascination, and also the fact that I wasn't seeing the submissions that I wanted to see in my inbox and the kinds of books on the shelves. I wasn't seeing people who looked like me, who thought like me, or who even just looked or thought differently from anyone else. It doesn't have to be me or me specific. And it felt like such an obvious hole, like, and
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
now, and I'm so very glad and grateful that this is a mandate that many houses and many agencies have taken on very seriously. But when I started out, that wasn't the case. I would discuss it with people in the industry. I would bring it up trepidatiously with editors I would have coffee with. And some of them would look at me like it was a novel idea. And this is not very far. This is within the last 6 to 7 years. It wasn't very far away from now. So yeah, I think that it's for me, it just seems like an obvious thing. I mean, why wouldn't we always want to have people have a platform where everyone can tell their stories? And of course, in a society where, in our society specifically, there's one specific kind of story that's been told for so many decades. I think it's time for more other kinds of stories to be told with as much room, and for us to welcome them as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's like you said, I mean, like it just that it seems obvious, like just enriching these different perspectives and stories being told in literature. And there are so many, like you said, like the Brooklyn same kind of story over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's great to be able to, it's so important to be able to broaden that. There's so much beyond that, like you said. And you kind of touched on it with like, saying this has been 6 or 7 years back. In the publishing industry in general, when you first came in, was there anything that like really just shocked you, and anything that still today manages to shock you and just be like kind of wow, could be a good shock, bad shock, anything like that?
I mean, it is adjacent to the previous answer in that, when I first started in the industry, I put myself out there a lot. I emailed a lot of editors I didn't know to build my own connections with people. Especially because my agency is known for very specific kinds of genres and categories like mystery, thriller, general nonfiction, but not necessarily children's fiction and nonfiction, which is what I focus on. So I sort of had to do that on my own. And a lot of very senior editors' responses to me were shocking in that I guess I expected them to at least pretend to be nice to me. Like a lot of them were just like, who are you? Like I would send a long email and they would respond being like, who are you? Or why do I not know who you are? Or should I waste my, like, I mean, seriously, just keep that with yourself. Just ignore me. You know what I mean? So that was shocking. That was shocking. I think before that, I was much more optimistic and wide-eyed about sort of the impact I could make and what I could do. And it was discouraging. I just felt as though I had to look and be from a certain background to be able to succeed, and it just didn't feel like I could for a long time. But I have to say, there were so many editors who were very warm. They were very kind. One positive shock was I emailed, for me at the time, and I still admire her so much. She's the editor of the Hunger Games series. She's a huge deal, and she's also very, very just a very fabulous and impressive, and just one of my idols. Her name is Andrea Davis Pinkney, and I emailed her on a lark, being like, I'm just going to email her, even though the people I was emailing, I was mostly focusing on sort of mid-level to younger editors, because I was like, I don't even know if I should, bother sort of the exec editors or the people who who like head the imprints, because they'd be like, who is this person who I've never heard of? Or, all those experiences sort of made me feel a little unconfident. But I was like, I'm going to email her. And she responded immediately and so warmly and just so kindly. And it just made my day. I was so happy. I remember texting all of my friends being like, I'm like email buddies with the editor of the Hunger Games, and they were super happy. And, it's just these small things that can really just bring you down, but they can also lift you up, so yeah, you don't forget them. And that's why I think it's so important to remember, at least for me, even now, I'm at a stage of my career where people email me asking questions, hoping for an informational, and I know how much of an impact I can make on their life, on their careers, on the way they think about how they write or whether they should write, just by responding, or even sometimes not by responding, because if I don't feel like it, I don't have to say anything negative, then I'm not just going to say anything. You know what I mean? So that kind of thing.
No, absolutely. And I mean, to your second story, the Hunger Games was like one of my favorite series growing up. So that's really cool. I'm like kind of geeking out with you. But it's like you said, like it's the small things. So when, now you're working as an agent and you are in this position where people are emailing you and reaching out to you as opposed to you reaching out to them, when you're working with your writers one-on-one, you're helping them editing stories, your team, what's like the most important, I guess, advice that you pass on to them and work like when you're working as that positive figure of reinforcement in their lives instead of the negative ones that you had to deal with when you first entered the industry?
These are for authors who are my clients?
Yeah. Or like just them, or even like other team members or anything like that?
I mean, I think one of my favorite things about my job is that each of my clients comes with their own very specific struggles and goals for their careers. And so I can sit with them and really just get into the weeds about what it is they want to do and how they can achieve it and how I can help them do it. So it's difficult to come up with one blanket answer, but I think for me, I'm always sort of gently reminding them that they get to decide what they want to do. And I think a lot of people, again, a very facile thought, but it is something that I think sometimes people need the permission to hear from other people, especially people that they trust or someone in the professional sphere, especially in an industry like ours where it is a creative driven one, but there's so many marketing incentives and there's so much pressure to have sort of a high concept or something that will sell, and it feels so counterintuitive to sort of writing what you want and writing the material that comes from your soul. And I'm always going to say, I'm always the person who will say, listen, I'm here to give you advice on what I think is selling now in terms of the trends that I can observe in terms of what editors are looking for. But I will always stress to all of my clients to just write what they want to, explore what they want to, feel the confidence that they should feel, that they are so very talented and that they have something to say and that their stories mean something. I think that developing that level of agency and honing your voice that way really builds your confidence in writing, in my opinion, and then it just makes you better. And the better you are as a writer, just intrinsically, the less important it matters to you how marketable your work is in general, right? That's just how it works. Of course, there has to be some basic level of this is something palatable or this is something that I can see would fit in someone's list. But ultimately, I think when your writing has that kind of dimension and that kind of depth and that kind of just an earnestness and an intention from from your heart and from kind of what you want to say. Every writer has something or some things they really believe in and that they just want to share. And it doesn't necessarily, I'm not saying that all writing is agenda driven. I just think that it can be emotional. It can be sort of like a fixation with something, with a condition, with an idea. And I think really just sitting with those emotions and leaning into them and letting them come into your writing organically and not muddying that intention by saying no, but this is not popular, or no one wants to hear this, no one wants to. That just keeps you away from reaching. I believe, and I tell this to my clients, that it keeps you away from reaching that sort of apex of how good you can be as a writer and as a communicator of those feelings and those ideas. If you have them and you feel strongly about them and you write them beautifully, no one else can come up with that, and that is your magic juice. So I hope that I can always nurture that in my authors, my clients, and also even when I talk to other authors at conferences who I don't work with personally, I'm like, I have a lot of feedback. I have my personal opinions. I can give you some advice on how people may receive your work, but I cannot stress how important it is that you do what you want to do because, even if you wrote the book that you think will sell, you will not be happy if it's not what you want to write at the end of the day, right? And that's really, really important. So, yeah, that's what I usually say, I think.
No, yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. And I mean, also like just to touch on, you're like you said, like you're there to give advice, but at the end of the day, it has to be what the writer wants to put out in the world. Do you feel like when you're working with different like authors, do you like kind of get as much from them as they're getting from you, like getting to see different writing styles, different themes? Do you feel like you get to like, I guess, is it kind of like a mutual, like taking in information from them, learning from them, where they learn from you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this job is I came in being a lover of writing and reading and storytelling, but after having been in this industry for, as long as I have, I just I feel like I have access to so much more than I could ever have dreamed of in terms of having expanded my own horizons of what good writing is, what interesting writing is, what storytelling is, what people can do with stories in terms of, structural experimentation, even in genre and category. I mean, there are some books that I have read and loved now that I could never have dreamed that I would even consider reading if I were not in the industry. And it has shaped my perspective and my perception of what it means to be like a good writer or a good book. It's so fulfilling. I absolutely love it. And then also at another level, when I meet authors, one of my favorite things is actually meeting authors. It's such an amazing feeling to like meet someone and they're usually all just from all kinds of backgrounds and just careers, and they come to the table with such vulnerability and just such a genuine interest in sharing something so personal. It's not always just memoir, obviously that's strictly personal, but when you write anything, it's like a shard of your soul is like you're presenting it to someone, right? It's such a humbling experience. And I love that. I love being in that situation and being trusted with it and talking with someone about how it is they can communicate it better and how it is they can share it better. And it's such a rewarding thing to feel that kind of a connection with someone in such a short time over something so personal, and feel as though I've maybe helped them through it a little bit. I find it to be very rewarding.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I haven't published any like books or writing of my own, but like I work on a student newspaper and like my editors are like my lifelines. Like, like you need that second pair of eyes, that person to like talk to or vent to. And they really do help bring along that final product. We've talked a lot about during this interview about kind of working with other writers, what the writing is to them. It's an emotional process, it's an outlet, it's memoir, it's all these different things. When it comes down to you at the end of the day, what is writing for you? What is that, look like? Is it an escape? Is it something that is like a part of you? Just, I guess, what is writing to you?
I guess when you say writing, do you mean books? Because I don't write.
Yeah. Like, or I guess
Okay,
writing
just
is
make
like
it very clear. I do not write.
no, yeah, just like writing as I guess, work in general. Whether it's the novel or a memoir or whatever it is.
Right. I don't. That's a really interesting question, because I think something we like to joke about in the industry is that now that books are our career, we can go through phases where reading can be a little bit of a chore just because it's now adjacent to work. And I think when I first started, I was so ambitious and so overzealous, and I burnt out very soon because I was reading so much of my own submissions, and I just didn't take the time to really just pause, read some of my favorite authors, sometimes read some poetry, read some flash fiction, just keep up with what's being published outside of kind of my submissions. And when I did that more consciously, I realized, okay, this is why I do this job, because this is, I mean, yeah, I mean, reading has always been just something that I do that's for me, and I think that I do a lot of things for a lot of people, and I think all of us do, but when you read, it feels like, for me, I'm just sort of nurturing my own soul and taking that time to do that. And of course, I now, obviously, even when I do read for pleasure other published books, I am definitely thinking, these are the decisions they made, these are the editorial decisions they made. I understand what's going on. Like, it's absolutely impossible for me to shut that part of my brain, but I do it with a sense of joy. Like I do it because I enjoy it. I'm just like, oh, this is an interesting way of thinking about it. I like how they marketed it. Oh, it's so interesting that the cover kind of communicated that this is a certain book, but it's actually this kind of book, in my opinion. And would I have made the same choice? And, things like that. Like now when I read personally, I am able to both simultaneously take that opportunity to feel sort of like be immersed in a story that I'm not personally, or professionally involved in, creating or, in manufacturing in any way, but also kind of at the same time be able to sort of think and evaluate what that book is doing on the shelf, why it got on the shelf, why so many people decided to acquire it or champion it, or why it doesn't make sense that they did. I mean, sometimes I just don't get it, right? So I just, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but to me, books are ultimately, fundamentally, sometimes I know when I'm not reaching out for a book to read for myself on my own time, it's almost automatically symptomatic that I'm not taking care of myself. And I try my best not to do that as I get older, especially because I know I need it more.
No, it definitely answered my question. I think you put it in like a really tangible way. I mean, I'm also like a book lover. I don't read as much as I would like to, but I feel like, there's something wrong if I'm not reaching for that book. I feel like that's like a very like universal feeling for a lot of people. Um, we've gotten to talk a lot today about reading, about your own work as an agent. Is there anything that you want to add on that I haven't touched on, or anything that you want to talk about that I have not?
I can't think of anything. No.
Got you. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I feel like I learned so much about you and about the publishing agency and literary agencies. And yeah, I just really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
Absolutely. My pleasure.